Captain Jake Morrison walked into the bridge of his ship, the Defiant, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. He had been awake for 36 hours straight, trying to make sense of the messages coming from the Zelthari Empire. The insect-like aliens had been humanity's first contact with intelligent life from another world, and for 3 months everything had seemed perfect. They shared technology, discussed culture, and talked about building a future together in the galaxy. But something had changed in the last few days. The messages from the Zelthari had become strange. They were using words that the translation computers marked as threatening. They kept talking about something called the human assignment, and how humans had failed to complete it. The tone was aggressive, almost angry. Sophie Carter sat at her station, her fingers flying across the controls as she tried to decode the latest transmission. She was the communications officer, and she had been working just as hard as Jake to understand what was happening. Her face was pale, and when she looked up at Jake, he could see worry in her eyes. "Captain, you need to see this," Sophie said quietly. "I just finished translating the newest message from the Zelthari High Command. It's not good." Jake set down his coffee cup and walked over to her station. The words appeared on the screen in front of him, and as he read them, he felt his stomach drop. The translation was clear. The humans have failed to complete their assignment. According to Zelthari Protocol 7, any species that refuses to participate in educational requirements must be eliminated. The failure to complete assigned work indicates an inferior species that cannot contribute to galactic society. Preparation for termination of the human species will begin immediately. All Zelthari vessels are being mobilized. "What assignment?" Jake asked, his voice tight. "We never agreed to do any homework." "What are they talking about?" Sophie pulled up another file on her screen. "I went back through all our communications with them. 3 months ago, when we first made contact, they sent us what they called a cultural exchange packet. It was hundreds of pages of information about their society, their history, and their customs. Our diplomatic team read through most of it, but there was one section that nobody paid much attention to." She brought up a document on the main screen. It was titled Reciprocal Learning Exercises for New Species. Jake scanned through it quickly. It explained that the Zelthari believed all intelligent species should demonstrate their capacity for learning and problem-solving. As part of their first contact protocol, they always included a complex assignment that tested a new species' ability to think creatively and solve difficult problems. "They gave us homework," Jake said, his voice full of disbelief. "They gave us actual homework as part of making first contact." Pete Hughes, the tactical officer, spoke up from his station on the other side of the bridge. "Captain, I'm showing 7 large vessels leaving orbit around the Zelthari homeworld. They're Zelthari warships, and based on their trajectory, they're heading straight for Earth. At their current speed, they'll arrive in approximately 18 hours. Jake felt the weight of the situation settle on his shoulders. He had spent his entire adult life in Earth's space fleet. He had trained for combat, for exploration, for diplomacy, but he had never imagined that humanity's first interstellar war would start because someone didn't do their homework. "Sophie, get me everything you can find about Zelthari culture," Jake ordered. "There has to be something we can use. Pete, I want a full tactical analysis of those warships. What are we dealing with?" Sophie's fingers moved quickly across her controls. "Captain, I'm finding something interesting. The Zelthari take education very seriously. In their culture, learning is considered the highest virtue. Refusing to complete assigned work is one of the worst insults possible. It's seen as declaring yourself too superior to learn, or too inferior to be worth teaching. Either way, it's grounds for what they call correction through elimination. So they're going to kill us because we didn't know we had homework," Jake said. "This is insane." "There's more," Sophie continued. "They have something called the right of academic challenge. If a student believes their teacher has judged them unfairly, they can challenge the teacher to prove their superior knowledge. If the student can demonstrate equal or superior understanding, the teacher must acknowledge them as an equal." Jake's mind started racing. "So if we can prove we're smart enough, they have to stop trying to kill us?" "It's not that simple," Sophie warned. "The challenge has to be formal. You have to invoke the right properly, and you have to be willing to accept the consequences if you fail. If we challenge them and lose, it confirms their assessment that we're an inferior species. They'll have even more justification for eliminating us. Pete interrupted them. Captain, I'm getting readings on those Zelthari warships. Each one is about twice the size of our largest vessels. They're using some kind of biological technology that we don't fully understand. Their weapon systems appear to be based on directed energy and what looks like engineered organisms that can tear through ship hulls. How many ships do we have in range to intercept them? Jake asked. 2 others besides us, Pete replied. The Valiant under Captain Greg Patterson and the Resolute under Captain Lisa Freeman. Against 7 Zelthari warships, we'd be badly outnumbered. And that's assuming we want to start shooting at the only other intelligent species we've ever met. Jake knew Pete was right. Starting a shooting war with the Zelthari wasn't just tactically questionable. It was potentially the end of humanity's hope for a place in the galaxy. If they survived the battle, they would have made an enemy of a species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. There had to be another way. Get me a secure channel to both the Valiant and the Resolute, Jake said, and someone find Dr. Alan Foster. If we're going to take an alien test, I want our smartest people on it. Sophie nodded and started making the connections. Within minutes, Jake was looking at video screens showing Captain Greg Patterson and Captain Lisa Freeman. Both of them looked as tired and worried as Jake felt. I'm guessing you both got the same news, Jake said. That we're about to be exterminated over homework? Greg replied. Yeah, we got it. Please tell me you have a plan, Jake. I'm working on one, Jake said. Sophie found something in the Zelthari cultural database. They have a tradition called the Rite of Academic Challenge. If we invoke it properly, they're honor-bound to give us a chance to prove ourselves. Lisa leaned forward, her eyes sharp. And if we fail the challenge? Then we confirm everything they think about us being an inferior species, Jake admitted. But right now I'll take a chance over certain death. We have 18 hours before they get here. I say we use that time to become the best students humanity has ever produced. Dr. Alan Foster arrived on the bridge looking confused and worried. He was a thin man in his 40s with messy brown hair and glasses that he constantly pushed up his nose. As a xenobiologist, he had spent the last 3 months studying everything the Zelthari had shared about their biology and culture. He had been thrilled to have actual alien life to study. Now that same alien life was coming to destroy humanity, and he was being asked to save everyone. Captain Morrison, your message said this was urgent, Alan said as he walked onto the bridge. Something about an assignment? Jake gestured to Sophie, who brought up the Zelthari problem on the main screen. It was written in both the Zelthari language and translated into English. Alan read it slowly, his eyes getting wider with each line. The assignment asked a complex question about evolution and physics. It wanted to know how a species could naturally evolve the ability to process information faster than light. The problem involved quantum mechanics, biological adaptation, and theoretical physics. It was the kind of question that seemed designed to be impossible to answer. They gave this to us 3 months ago, Alan asked, still staring at the screen. And nobody told me about it? The diplomatic team thought it was just theoretical material, Jake explained. They didn't realize it was an actual test. Now the Zelthari are coming to kill us because we didn't complete it. We have 18 hours before they arrive. Can you solve it? Alan took off his glasses and cleaned them on his shirt, which was something he did when he was thinking hard. Captain, this question is asking how evolution could create something that seems to violate the laws of physics. The Zelthari don't think it's possible. That's why they gave it as a test. They expect species to admit it's impossible, which proves those species understand the limits of physics and biology. But what if it's not impossible? Sophie asked. What if there's an answer they haven't thought of? Alan put his glasses back on and stared at the problem again. That would require thinking about the question in a completely different way. The Zelthari are assuming that faster-than-light information processing would require breaking the laws of physics. But what if it doesn't? What if there's a way to achieve the same result without actually violating any physical laws? Pete looked up from his tactical display. Doctor, I don't mean to rush you, but we have 7 warships heading our way. Can you solve this or not? I don't know, Alan said honestly, but I'm going to try. I'll need access to all of Earth's research databases. I'll need every paper ever written about quantum mechanics, biology, consciousness, and evolution. And I'll need help. This is too big for one person. Jake nodded. You'll have whatever you need. Sophie, set up a secure network. I want our top scientists from Earth connected to this conversation. Greg, Lisa, do you have anyone on your ships who can help? Greg spoke up from his screen. We have Lieutenant Danny Wells on the Valiant. He's a pilot, but he has a degree in theoretical physics. Kids sharp as they come. Send him over to the Defiant, Jake ordered. We need all the brainpower we can get. Lisa, what about you? I have Lieutenant Claire Bennett, our science officer, Lisa replied. She specializes in quantum biology. If anyone can help figure out how evolution and quantum mechanics connect, it's her. Send her over too, Jake said. Alan, you're in charge of this project. You have full authority to use any resources you need. The future of humanity is depending on you solving a homework problem. No pressure, Alan laughed, but it was a nervous sound. When I became a scientist, I thought the hardest test I'd ever take was my doctoral exam. I was very wrong. Over the next several hours, the Defiant became a floating research center. Scientists from Earth joined the conversation through video links. Specialists in physics, biology, mathematics, and computer science all contributed ideas. The main conference room filled with screens showing equations, diagrams, and arguments between brilliant minds trying to solve an impossible problem. Danny Wells arrived from the Valiant, a young man with dark hair and an eager expression. Claire Bennett came from the Resolute, a woman in her 30s with red hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Both of them dove into the work immediately, adding their expertise to Alan's efforts. Jake checked in every few hours, but mostly he stayed on the bridge and let the scientists work. He knew his strengths, and advanced physics was not one of them. Instead, he focused on what he could control. He had the Defiant, Valiant, and Resolute move into a defensive formation. He studied everything they knew about Zelthari ships and weapons. If the academic challenge failed, he wanted to be ready for whatever came next. 12 hours passed, then 14. Jake was starting to worry that they wouldn't have an answer in time when Alan suddenly appeared on the bridge, practically running. His hair was even messier than usual, and he had the wild-eyed look of someone who hadn't slept but was too excited to care. Captain, we have something, Alan said breathlessly. It's not a complete solution, but it's a direction. It might be enough. Tell me, Jake said. Alan pulled up a presentation on the main screen. The Zelthari asked how a species could naturally evolve faster than light information processing. The key word is naturally. Evolution doesn't create new physics. It exploits existing physics in creative ways. So we started looking at quantum effects that already exist in biological systems right here on Earth. Claire's face appeared on another screen. She was still on the Resolute, but she was clearly part of the presentation. We found examples of quantum coherence in photosynthesis, she explained. Plants use quantum effects to transfer energy with almost perfect efficiency. We also found evidence of quantum processes in bird navigation. Some birds can sense Earth's magnetic field because of quantum entanglement in proteins in their eyes. Danny added his part from another screen. The breakthrough came when we stopped thinking about faster-than-light transmission of information. That would violate physics. Instead, we thought about quantum entanglement. When two particles are entangled, measuring one instantly affects the other no matter how far apart they are. It's not transmitting information faster than light. The correlation already exists. It's already connected, Alan continued. So imagine a species that evolved neural structures using quantum entanglement. Their brains wouldn't be sending signals faster than light. Instead, different parts of their nervous system would be quantumly entangled. The information wouldn't need to travel because it would already exist in a connected quantum state. Jake tried to follow along. So you're saying it's possible? We're saying we found evidence that the building blocks already exist on Earth, Alan said. Quantum effects in biology are real. They're rare and they're subtle, but they're there. Given enough evolutionary time and the right environmental pressures, a species could potentially develop more sophisticated quantum biological systems. Maybe even something approaching faster-than-light coordination through quantum entanglement. Is this going to be enough to convince the Zelthari? Jake asked. Alan looked uncertain. I don't know, Captain. We're presenting a theory that contradicts what the Zelthari have believed for thousands of years. They designed this question to be impossible. We're telling them they were wrong about that. It could go either way. Jake checked the time. They had less than 3 hours before the Zelthari fleet arrived. All right, keep refining the presentation. Make it as clear and convincing as possible. Sophie, I need you to prepare a formal invocation of the right of academic challenge. It has to be perfect. If we mess up the protocol, they might not even listen to our answer. Sophie had been researching Zelthari customs and traditions for hours. I have the format ready, Captain. The challenge must be issued by the leader of the group. That's you. You have to state it in specific terms, acknowledging their authority as educators while asserting our right to prove our worth as students. Great, Jake muttered. So I have to be respectful and defiant at the same time. Welcome to dealing with alien cultures, Sophie said with a tired smile. I've written out the exact words you should use. The translation software will convert it to proper Zelthari. As long as you follow the script, you should be fine. Pete's voice cut through the conversation. Captain, I'm detecting the Zelthari fleet. They just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. 7 warships exactly as predicted. They're taking up a formation around our position. We're surrounded. Jake felt his heart rate increase, but he kept his voice calm. Are they powering weapons? Not yet, Pete replied. They're just holding position. I think they're waiting to see what we do. That's our cue, Jake said. He stood up and straightened his uniform. Sophie, open a channel to the Zelthari fleet. Make sure all 3 of our ships are included in the transmission. I want everyone to see this. The main screen changed to show the interior of a Zelthari ship. The aliens looked like enormous insects, but with an intelligence in their multifaceted eyes that was unmistakably sentient. The one in the center was larger than the others, with elaborate markings on its carapace. This was High Educator Zalthor, the leader of the fleet. Humans of Earth, Zalthor said, his mandibles clicking as he spoke. The translation software turned his words into English. You have demonstrated your unfitness for participation in galactic society. You were given a simple assignment to test your capacity for learning and problem-solving. You ignored it. This shows either arrogance or ignorance, and neither quality is acceptable in a species that wishes to join the galactic community. We have come to perform the necessary correction. Your species will be eliminated so that you do not waste the time and resources of other civilized worlds. Jake took a breath and read from the script Sophie had prepared. High Educator Zalthor, I am Captain Jake Morrison, speaking on behalf of humanity. I acknowledge your authority as an educator and the validity of the Zelthari educational protocols. However, I must contest your assessment of humanity. We did not refuse your assignment out of arrogance or ignorance. We failed to recognize it as an assignment at all. This was a misunderstanding, not a rejection of learning. Zalthor's mandibles clicked rapidly. Ignorance of a requirement does not excuse failure to meet that requirement. I agree, Jake said, following the script. That is why I formally invoke the right of academic challenge. I assert that humanity has the capacity for learning and problem-solving that you seek in galactic citizens. I challenge you to allow us to demonstrate this capacity by completing the assignment you gave us. If we succeed, you must recognize us as equals. If we fail, then your assessment is confirmed and you may proceed as you see fit. There was a long silence. The other Zelthari on the screen clicked and gestured to each other in what looked like a rapid discussion. Finally, Zalthor turned back to the camera. You know of the right of academic challenge, Zalthor said, and there was something like surprise in his tone. This is unexpected. Very few species learn of our customs so quickly. The right is sacred to us. It is the foundation of our educational philosophy. I cannot refuse a properly invoked challenge. Jake felt relief wash over him. They had bought themselves time. However, Zalthor continued, you must understand the stakes. The right of academic challenge is not a game. If you fail to provide a satisfactory answer to the assignment, you will have proven beyond doubt that your species lacks the intellectual capacity we require. There will be no second chances. No appeals. You will have one standard Zelthari cycle to present your solution. That is 26 of your Earth hours. Do you accept these terms? Jake looked around the bridge. Sophie nodded. Pete gave him a thumbs up. On the other screens, Greg and Lisa both signaled their agreement. We accept, Jake said firmly. We will present our solution in 26 hours. Then we will hold position and observe, Zalthor said. Use your time wisely, humans. The future of your species depends on what you show us. The transmission ended. Pete let out a long breath. Well, that was terrifying. But we got what we wanted. More time. And more pressure, Sophie added. Now we know for certain that if we fail, there's no backup plan. We get this right or humanity ends. Jake turned to Alan, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes. Dr. Foster, you now have 26 hours instead of 3. Use them well. What do you need? Alan pushed his glasses up his nose. Coffee, lots of coffee. And I need to get back to work. We have a good foundation, but we need to make this answer bulletproof. The Zelthari have been studying science for thousands of years. They're not going to accept anything less than a complete, well-supported theory. You'll have all the coffee you can drink, Jake promised. Go. Save humanity. As Alan hurried off the bridge, Jake sat down in his captain's chair and rubbed his eyes. He'd been awake for more than 40 hours now, and he could feel exhaustion pulling at him. But he couldn't rest, not yet. Not until this was over. Greg's voice came from the communication screen. Jake, my crew is asking questions. They want to know what's happening. What should I tell them? Tell them the truth, Jake replied. We made first contact with aliens who take homework very seriously. Now we're cramming for the biggest test in human history. And if we fail, we don't just get a bad grade. We get extinction. Lisa spoke up from her screen. That's going to cause panic. Maybe, Jake admitted. But they deserve to know what's at stake. Besides, panic might not be the worst thing right now. I want everyone on all 3 ships thinking about this problem. Maybe someone will have an insight we missed. The more brains we have working on this, the better our chances. The next 20 hours passed in a blur of activity. The conference room on the Defiant had become the center of humanity's desperate attempt to prove itself worthy of survival. Scientists argued over theories. Mathematicians checked calculations. Biologists debated evolutionary pathways. And through it all, Alan Foster kept pushing everyone to think bigger, to find connections that nobody had seen before. Jake spent most of his time on the bridge, monitoring the Zelthari fleet. The 7 warships held their position, not moving, not communicating. They were simply waiting to see what humanity would produce. It was eerie to look at them on the tactical display, knowing that each one of those ships could probably destroy all 3 human vessels without much effort. Sophie worked on refining the presentation. She knew that how they delivered the answer would be almost as important as the answer itself. The Zelthari valued clear thinking and logical progression. The presentation had to be perfect. It was Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez, the medical officer, who made the breakthrough that tied everything together. Sam was a quiet man in his 30s who usually stayed in the medical bay and didn't get involved in ship operations. But he had been listening to the scientific debates, and something had occurred to him. Sam walked onto the bridge looking nervous. Captain Morrison, I need to speak with Dr. Foster. I think I have something important. Jake called Alan to the bridge. The scientist arrived looking exhausted but alert. Sam, what is it? I've been thinking about the quantum effects in biology that we've been discussing, Sam said. The evidence from plants and birds and other organisms, but we've been looking at it all as separate examples. What if they're not separate? What if they're all part of a larger pattern? What do you mean? Alan asked. Sam pulled up a display on one of the screens. I started looking at human biology, our brains specifically. There's been research for decades suggesting that consciousness might have a quantum component. It's controversial and we don't have proof, but the data is intriguing. What if human intuition, our ability to sometimes know things without knowing how we know them, is actually a primitive quantum effect? Claire's voice came through the communication system from the Resolute. Sam, are you suggesting that humans already have the beginnings of quantum information processing? Not in any advanced way, Sam clarified. But think about it. We have documented cases of people knowing things they shouldn't be able to know. Mothers who sense when their children are in danger halfway across the world. Twins who report feeling each other's pain. We usually dismiss these as coincidence or wishful thinking. But what if some of them are real? What if they're evidence of quantum entanglement in human neural tissue? Alan's eyes went wide. That would complete our argument. We wouldn't just be theorizing about how evolution could produce quantum information processing. We'd be showing that it's already starting to happen in humans. We'd be evidence of our own theory. Danny's voice joined the conversation from his station. It makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, too. If quantum effects provide any survival advantage, even a tiny one, natural selection would favor them. Over enough time, they could become more pronounced, more sophisticated. Alan started pacing, which was what he did when he was excited. This is it. This is what we need. We're not just answering their impossible question. We're proving that the answer is standing right in front of them. Humans are a species in the early stages of developing quantum biological processes. We're proof that their supposedly impossible scenario is actually happening. Jake watched as the scientists got more and more energized. So we have our answer? We have our answer, Alan confirmed. Now we just have to present it in a way that the Zelthari can't dismiss. We need to organize all the evidence, Show the progression from simple quantum effects in primitive life to more complex systems in advanced organisms. Then demonstrate that humans show preliminary signs of quantum consciousness. It's a complete evolutionary pathway. For the next 6 hours, the team worked on perfecting their presentation. They gathered every piece of relevant research from Earth's scientific databases. They created visual aids showing quantum effects in different organisms. They prepared explanations that were thorough but clear. Everything had to be precise. Everything had to be defensible. Jake finally forced himself to sleep for 3 hours. Sophie practically had to order him to his quarters. When he woke up, there were only 2 hours left until the deadline. He returned to the bridge feeling slightly more human. "Status report," he said as he sat down in his captain's chair. "The Zelthari haven't moved," Pete reported, "still just watching and waiting. And the science team says they're ready. The presentation is complete." Sophie turned to Jake. "Captain, Dr. Foster wants to practice the presentation one more time before we show it to the Zelthari. He's worried about timing. Tell him we don't have time for more practice," Jake said. "We go in 90 minutes. That gives us a 30-minute buffer in case something goes wrong. Everyone needs to eat something and get ready." This is it. The word spread through all 3 ships. Humanity's answer was ready. Now it was time to present it to judges who held the power of life and death over the entire species. Alan came to the bridge with Claire, Danny, and Sam. All 4 of them looked nervous, but determined. They had spent nearly 24 hours straight working on this problem, and now they would see if their efforts were enough. "We're ready, Captain," Alan said, "or as ready as we're going to be." Jake stood and faced his crew. "I want everyone to understand something. What you've done in the last day is remarkable. You've taken an impossible problem and found a solution. You've shown exactly the kind of creative thinking and determination that makes humanity special. No matter what happens in the next hour, I'm proud to serve with all of you." Sophie smiled. "That was a good speech, Captain. Very inspiring. Now let's go show some aliens that humans are smarter than they thought." Jake nodded. "Sophie, open a channel to the Zelthari fleet. All frequencies. I want every ship on both sides to see this." The main screen changed to show High Educator Zalthor and his council of 6 other Zelthari educators. They looked exactly as they had 26 hours earlier, patient and impassive. "Humans," Zalthor said, "your time limit has been reached. Are you prepared to present your response to the assignment?" "We are," Jake replied. "High Educator, I present Dr. Alan Foster, along with Lieutenant Claire Bennett, Lieutenant Danny Wells, and Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez. They will explain our solution." Zalthor gestured with one of his forearms. "Proceed." Alan stepped forward, and despite his nervousness, his voice was steady. "High Educator, honored council members, we present our answer to your question about the natural evolution of faster-than-light information processing. We propose that such evolution is not only possible, but is already occurring on our own planet Earth." There was a clicking sound from the Zelthari. Zalthor leaned forward slightly. "This is a bold claim, explain." And so they did. For the next 40 minutes, Alan and his team presented their case. Claire showed evidence of quantum coherence in photosynthesis, explaining how plants had evolved to use quantum effects millions of years ago. Danny explained the quantum compass that birds use to navigate, demonstrating that evolution had already produced biological quantum systems multiple times on Earth. Sam presented the data on human consciousness and intuition, carefully explaining that while the evidence was preliminary, it suggested that humans might already have primitive quantum processes in their brains. He showed studies, statistics, and documented cases that were hard to explain through conventional science. Finally, Alan brought it all together. The key insight is understanding that evolution doesn't create new physics. It exploits existing physics in increasingly sophisticated ways. Quantum entanglement exists. It's a fundamental property of the universe. Life on Earth has already evolved to use quantum effects in multiple ways. Given enough evolutionary time and the right environmental pressures, there's no physical reason why a species couldn't develop more advanced quantum biological systems, potentially including faster-than-light coordination, through quantum entanglement of neural tissue. The presentation ended. Alan and his team stood waiting for a response. The silence stretched out, becoming uncomfortable. The Zelthari council members clicked and gestured to each other in their own language. The translation software couldn't keep up with the rapid discussion, but Jake could see that the aliens were deeply engaged with what they had heard. Finally, After what felt like an eternity, High Educator Zalthor spoke. Dr. Foster, your team has presented an interesting theory, but you are asking us to believe that the impossible scenario we designed is actually possible. More than that, you claim humans are evidence of this evolution occurring. This requires us to reconsider principles we have held for 3,000 years. Alan stepped forward. High Educator, with respect, I believe that's exactly the point of education. To challenge what we think we know. To find new understanding. You gave us an assignment you thought was impossible. We've shown you evidence that it might not be. Isn't that what learning is supposed to be about? One of the other Zelthari Council members spoke up. But your evidence is incomplete. You show quantum effects in simple organisms. You show preliminary data suggesting quantum processes in human consciousness. But you do not show a fully realized system of faster-than-light information processing. You show potential, not achievement. Claire responded to this. That's true. But evolution takes millions of years. We're not claiming that humans have achieved advanced quantum consciousness. We're showing that the evolutionary pathway exists, that the building blocks are real, that given enough time your supposedly impossible scenario could actually occur naturally. Another council member interjected. Your theory about quantum entanglement in neural tissue is clever. But information through entanglement requires careful preparation of the quantum states. How would evolution create the precise conditions needed? Danny took this question. The same way evolution solves any complex problem, through small incremental steps over vast periods of time. Every evolutionary innovation seems impossible until we understand the pathway. Eyes seem impossible until you trace the evolution from light-sensitive cells to complex organs. Flight seems impossible until you understand the progression from gliding to powered flight. Quantum consciousness would follow the same pattern. The Zelthari Council continued to debate among themselves. Jake watched the exchange with growing tension. He couldn't tell if they were being convinced or preparing to reject the entire argument. The clicking and gesturing seemed to become more animated, more intense. Then Zalthor raised one of his forearms, and the other Zelthari immediately fell silent. The High Educator looked directly at the screen, his multifaceted eyes seeming to study each human face. In 3,000 years of administering this assignment to species across the galaxy, Zalthor said slowly, none have provided a satisfactory answer. We considered the question proof that certain evolutionary outcomes were impossible, barriers that separated the truly advanced civilizations from those who merely achieved technology through chance. Jake felt his heart sink. This sounded like the beginning of a rejection. But you have done something unexpected, Zalthor continued. You have not simply answered our question. You have revealed a failure in our own thinking. We designed an assignment to test others, but we stopped testing ourselves. We assumed impossibility rather than seeking understanding. We became teachers who forgot to remain students. The High Educator stood, and the 6 other council members rose with him. Dr. Foster, Captain Morrison, crew of the human vessels, you have passed the assignment. Not because you proved the impossible, but because you taught us to question our assumptions. You showed us that true education requires humility from both teacher and student. Relief washed through the bridge. Sophie let out a breath she had been holding. Pete pumped his fist in silent celebration. On the other screens, Jake could see similar reactions on the Valiant and the Resolute. However, Zalthor said, and Jake felt the relief turn back into tension. There remains the matter of your initial failure to complete the assignment on the proper schedule. The bridge went quiet again. Jake steeled himself for whatever was coming next. For this failure, Zalthor continued, we must assign additional educational requirements. You will establish an embassy on our homeworld. You will share your methods of creative problem-solving with our students. You will help us remember that even the most learned must always be willing to learn more. These requirements are mandatory. We will not accept refusal. It took Jake a moment to process what he was hearing. High Educator, are you saying we're being punished for not doing our homework by being forced to teach you? The clicking sound that came from Zalthor might have been laughter. An interesting way to phrase it, but essentially correct. You failed as students. Now you must succeed as teachers. Is this acceptable? Jake looked around the bridge. Everyone was smiling now. High Educator Zalthor, on behalf of humanity, we accept your assignment. We'll try not to turn it in late. See that you do not, Zalthor replied. We are beginning to understand that you humans have much to teach us. We look forward to this new educational partnership. The Zelthari warships began powering down their weapons systems. The threat was over. Humanity had faced extinction and survived by doing homework. Alan sat down heavily in a nearby chair, looking like he might pass out from exhaustion and relief. I can't believe that worked. I genuinely thought we were all going to die. We're not out of trouble yet, Sophie said with a grin. Now we have to actually set up an embassy and teach the Zelthari. That's going to be interesting. Jake shook his head in amazement. We made first contact with aliens. They tried to kill us over a homework assignment. We challenged them to an academic duel. We won by teaching them something new, and now they want us to be teachers in their schools. This is the strangest first contact story in history. Pete was checking his tactical display. Captain, the Zelthari ships are moving into a peaceful formation alongside us. I'm receiving docking protocols and embassy guidelines. Sir, they're already sending us homework for the embassy assignment. Of course they are, Jake said. Sophie, acknowledge receipt and confirm we'll review the materials. Then I want you to send a message to Earth Command explaining what just happened. Try to make it sound less insane than it actually is. That might be impossible, sir, Sophie replied. How do I explain that humanity avoided extinction by being good students? Tell them the truth, Jake said. We faced the universe's toughest teachers and turned it into a learning experience. We didn't just survive. We taught them something. That's the most human thing possible. As the crew began the process of standing down from battle stations and preparing for their new role as educators, Jake sat in his captain's chair and thought about the last day. They had been hours away from extinction. The future of humanity had hung on solving an impossible problem under impossible time pressure, and they had done it. Not through weapons or threats or negotiation, but through learning, through creativity, through the very human ability to look at an impossible situation and find a way forward. Lieutenant Danny Wells walked over to Jake. Captain, I've been monitoring communications from Earth. News of what happened is spreading. People are calling it the homework war. Students everywhere are suddenly taking their assignments much more seriously. Jake laughed. I guess that's one positive outcome. Though I'm sure teachers everywhere are going to use this story. Do your homework or the aliens will get upset. It's more than that, sir, Danny said. Universities are restructuring their programs. They're emphasizing creative problem-solving and interdisciplinary thinking. Everyone wants to be ready if the aliens give us more homework. Education is suddenly the most important thing in the world, Sophie added her own observation. I'm seeing similar trends in scientific research. Funding is pouring into quantum biology. Everyone wants to understand the theories we presented. We might have accidentally started a scientific revolution. Over the next several days, the relationship between humans and Zelthari transformed completely. What had begun as a near-war situation became an enthusiastic partnership. The Zelthari were fascinated by human creativity and problem-solving methods. Humans were eager to learn from a species that had been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years. High Educator Zalthor requested a personal meeting with Jake, Alan, and the others who had presented the solution. They met aboard the Zelthari flagship, a massive vessel that looked like a floating biological structure rather than a traditional spaceship. The interior was unlike anything Jake had seen, with curved organic walls and bioluminescent lighting. Zalthor greeted them in a large chamber that served as his office. Captain Morrison, Dr. Foster, I wanted to speak with you privately, to explain something about the assignment we gave you. We're listening, Jake said. The high educator settled into a resting position that looked uncomfortable to human eyes but was apparently natural for Zelthari. The question we gave you was not originally designed as a test for new species. It was a research problem that our greatest scientists worked on for centuries. We could not solve it. Eventually, we concluded it was impossible. The question became a test because we believed it would force species to confront the limits of their knowledge, to admit what could not be achieved. Alan leaned forward. But we didn't know it was supposed to be impossible. We just saw it as a problem to solve. Exactly, Zalthor said, and that made all the difference. You approached the question without our preconceptions, without our certainty about what could and could not be done. Your ignorance became an advantage. You were free to think in ways we had stopped allowing ourselves to think. Claire spoke up. So when you said we taught you something, you meant it literally. We showed you an answer to your own research problem. More than that, Zalthor replied. You reminded us of something we had forgotten. When we were a younger species, we questioned everything. We challenged every assumption. That curiosity drove us to achieve great things, but over time, we became comfortable with our knowledge. We stopped questioning. We started believing we had all the important answers. Your species, so young and inexperienced by our standards, showed us that we had become intellectually stagnant. Jake tried to process this. So the homework assignment that almost got us killed was actually a problem you couldn't solve yourselves? Yes, Zalthor confirmed. And your solution may be correct. Since your presentation, our scientists have been reviewing your evidence and expanding on your theories. We are finding more examples of quantum effects in biology across the galaxy. You may have opened an entirely new field of study for us. This is why we wish you to establish an embassy. We have much to learn from your approach to problems. Sam asked a question that had been bothering him. Hi, educator. If you couldn't solve the problem yourselves, why were you so ready to eliminate us for not solving it? Zalthor was quiet for a moment. That is a question I have been asking myself. I think the answer is uncomfortable. We were not testing you. We were protecting our own pride. If another species could solve what we could not, it would challenge our position as educators of the galaxy. By eliminating species who failed the test, we ensured we would never face that challenge. Your species forced us to confront this truth about ourselves. So we passed your test by proving the test was flawed. Jake said, That's very human of us. Indeed, Zalthor agreed. And that is precisely why we value your species. You do not accept limitations easily. You question authority. You find new paths when the old paths are blocked. These are qualities we once had and have lost. We hope to rediscover them by working with you. The meeting continued for hours. They discussed plans for the embassy, cultural exchange programs, and joint research projects. The Zelthari were particularly interested in human education methods. They wanted to understand how a species so young had developed such creative problem-solving abilities. When Jake and his team returned to the Defiant, they found messages waiting from Earth. The planetary government wanted full reports on everything that had happened. Scientists wanted details on the quantum biology theories. News agencies wanted interviews. Everyone on Earth wanted to understand how humanity had avoided extinction and become teachers to a species thousands of years more advanced. Jake called a meeting with the senior officers from all 3 ships. Greg and Lisa joined by video link while Pete, Sophie, and the others gathered on the Defiance bridge. We need to talk about what comes next, Jake began. The Zelthari want to establish formal relations with Earth. They're offering technology sharing, cultural exchanges, and access to their knowledge of the galaxy. In return, they want us to help them remember how to think creatively. They want human teachers, researchers, and students to work with them. Greg looked thoughtful. This is a huge opportunity, but it's also a huge responsibility. We'll be representing humanity to a species that could destroy us if things go wrong. I think things going wrong is less of a concern now, Lisa said. The Zelthari have shown they're willing to learn from their mistakes. That incident with the homework assignment taught them humility. They're not going to make the same error again, Sophie added her perspective. I've been studying more of their culture. The Zelthari have a concept they call educational honor. Once they accept someone as a teacher, that person has special status in their society. By asking us to teach them, they're giving us a position of respect. It's a bigger deal than it might seem. Alan, who had been quiet, finally spoke. I've been thinking about the bigger picture. The Zelthari have been in space for thousands of years. They've met hundreds of other species. But they're treating us as special. Why? What makes humans different? Our approach to problems, Claire suggested. We don't give up easily. We try unconventional solutions. We question assumptions. It's more than that, Danny said. I think it's because we're not afraid to be wrong. The Zelthari told us they stopped questioning because they thought they had the answers. Humans never think we have all the answers. We're always looking for better ones. Jake nodded slowly. That's probably true. And that's what we need to remember as we move forward with this partnership. We can't start thinking we have everything figured out. The moment we stop questioning, we become like the Zelthari were before we met them. Pete brought up a practical concern. Captain, Earth Command is asking who's going to staff this embassy. They want volunteers for a long-term assignment on the Zelthari homeworld. I'm going, Alan said immediately. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. To study an alien species up close, to work with their scientists, to explore new ideas. I can't pass that up. Claire, Danny, and Sam all volunteered as well. Others from the crew expressed interest. It seemed that nearly everyone wanted to be part of humanity's first embassy to an alien world. Jake made a decision. I'll recommend to Earth Command that we staff the embassy with people from all 3 ships. We work together to solve this crisis. We should work together to build this partnership. Greg, Lisa, are you in agreement? Both captains nodded. Absolutely, Greg said. This is bigger than any one ship or any one captain. This is about humanity's future in the galaxy. Over the following weeks, the embassy took shape. A team of 30 humans traveled to the Zelthari homeworld, a planet covered in massive hive-like structures that housed billions of insectoid aliens. The embassy building was designed as a collaboration between human and Zelthari architects, combining elements of both cultures. Jake remained as the senior human representative, though he made it clear he was an administrator, not an educator. The real teachers were people like Alan, who established a research program studying quantum biology with Zelthari scientists. Claire started a cultural exchange program. Danny taught courses on creative problem-solving to Zelthari students. Sam set up a medical exchange, sharing information about human biology while learning about Zelthari physiology. The first joint research project produced remarkable results. By combining human creativity with Zelthari accumulated knowledge, they made breakthroughs in quantum biology that neither species could have achieved alone. They discovered that quantum effects in biological systems were far more common than anyone had realized. They found evidence suggesting that consciousness itself might be fundamentally quantum in nature. These discoveries changed both species. The Zelthari remembered how exciting it was to explore the unknown. Humans learned the value of patience and thoroughness from species with thousands of years of scientific tradition. Together, they began to map out a new understanding of how life and physics interacted. Jake stood in the embassy courtyard one evening, watching the Zelthari sunset. The planet had 3 moons, and they were all visible in the darkening sky. Sophie came and stood beside him. Thinking about how far we've come, she asked. Thinking about how weird this all is, Jake replied. A few weeks ago, we were about to be exterminated over homework. Now we're teaching aliens and doing joint research. It's surreal. It's humanity in a nutshell, Sophie said. We turn impossible situations into opportunities. We make friends with people trying to kill us. We refuse to accept that anything is truly impossible. The Zelthari are starting to